Okay, good morning, everybody. This will be the third chapter in the first contact series. It was delayed a little bit because we had all sorts of other, I would say, ventures, mostly music related. During last week, maybe you've had the opportunity to listen to some of the new kind of mixes. And also, I should say that I apologize that for this video I will be concentrating not just on the lecture, the video, but also in the construction that I want to finish. This is this is like a mixture. That was kind of prepared with Neos after much dilution, but also a little bit of cooking. So now we will test. The hypothesis of what happens if you cook not just the pot from from fire from below, but you also burn things in the crucible. So I'll test because the assumption that I had from also I was saying anecdotal evidence, but pretty convincing from the past, that it actually makes them larger, or it produces large neos, very large neos that are not produced otherwise. So we'll test that by taking a microscopic examination, maybe even today, from this pot. It's kind of like the reference, and from these two that I'll take care of right now. So I'll do it in parallel to the video, and I hope you will not you will forgive me for that. Now I remind you, the question that we stayed with, after the second part was. We had three questions. We had the question of when should we actually, aim to if we are because again, in first contact scenarios, the usual circumstances, dictated by logic and by the properties of the universe, is that the one culture is it's not symmetrical. It's never symmetrical. One culture is much superior to the other one. So it's not just meeting between two equal parts. It's never like that. There is the superior part and there is the inferior part, technologically speaking. So the superior, all the questions, that are involved are questions that are aimed for the superior side. They are the ones that they have the limitations, like the prime directive, for example. And so we ask this question from the superior point of view. Let's say that we are now Vulcans that are that wants to decide when, if at all, should they reveal themselves to the people of the earth, if at all, and when, and how. So the question is if at all, is one question. Is it good or bad? And second is, when should this be done? Again, the Star Trek solution that we did not accept, and we explain why, is to do it once the inferior species, discovered the faster than light engine, which is a real thing in our world, in this universe. But we explain why it's a problematic, time for that, a barrier for that. And there is also a question of how. How should this be done? Now, for the questions of whether we should do it at all, and how should it be done, so in order, for that kind of to answer these questions, I would like to mention a fictional representation of a very bad, of incredibly bad, solution to the problem. This is the novel Childhood Ends by Ketz Ildut of Arthur C. Clarke, for maybe about 1970 or something like that. Actually, all the three novels that I'm going to discuss in this chapter and the next one, they are all. I'm planning to make a four-part series, two already existing ones, this one and another one video. So The three novels that we have discussed, they are all, I think, I mean, accidentally, they are all from the year 1970 or 1969, 1971, something like that. I haven't checked, but it should be something like that, 1970. The first is Childhood Ends by Arthur C. Clarke. It was adapted to TV. Actually, I haven't watched it besides a couple of minutes. Like, I watched a couple of minutes and it didn't seem particularly interesting to me, actually. Like, it seemed like pretty faithful, actually, to the novel, but not of particular, artistic merit. But maybe I'm wrong, I'm not sure. Like, I didn't see much value in watching it. Even though I did like the novel, like I read it as a young person and I did like it. In general, I should say that I'm kind of like I'm not like a huge fan of Arthur C. Clarke. He was, at the time, and for a long time, I mean, he was considered like a very, I would say, important novelist. Often in the past, he was cited along Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein as like the three great science fiction authors of the 20th century. I'm not sure about it. Like, I mean, I think he was inferior to these two gentlemen, by much. But he was okay. I mean, he wasn't that bad. Some say that personally he had all sorts of like vices. Some say of the type that are actually, unfortunately, common among my audience. I don't know about it. I mean, it's not my business. I leave that to the Holy Inquisition, to the Holy See. That's why we have a Holy Inquisition, to investigate such things. But yeah, I mean, he had several important novels, and this is like, it's one of his better novels, Childhood Ends. Even though it depicts kind of like although Rendezvous with Rama is pretty good novel. It's like an okay novel, not a great, but I mean not one of the greatest, but certainly a good one. And I understand it's like they're making a film out of it, like a movie out of it, if I'm not mistaken. So it's going to be interesting. This is actually a better kind of choice to adapt for cinema than Childhood Ends, I think. So it might be actually, like an eye candy, it's like an opportunity to showcase, to be a showcase of our time, like 21st century CGI. Could be interesting. In the past, it was considered like unfilmable because of like technical limitations, but I don't see why. But this should not hold. I mean, I think every technical difficulty, should have been like already resolved. In the last 15 years. So it should be like a nice eye candy, I guess. Rendezvous with Rama. So Childhood Ends is interesting because on the one hand, it's kind of like it deals with a relatively trivial, I would say, situation within the realm of science fiction. Like a basic situation, like a situation that is easily, I would say, referable or understood by the audience. And it was already like that by the year it was published during 1970. It was already like a staple of science fiction, and certainly today more so than then, naturally. It only became like more common, like this kind of like meme or motive. The meme of like the benevolent or questionably benevolent, but not manifestly malevolent, not explicitly or manifestly malevolent aliens, extraterrestrials, civilization that come to visit Earth with ships, with actual ships that land on Earth. Like that they actually do the landing, or just hovering, like doing relatively recently in Arrival, which is also a nice, like a sci-fi adaptation. I think by Denis Villeneuve, the Dune guy. So actually a pretty good movie. Not great, but pretty good movie. But I'm not going to discuss Arrival, even though it should be said that. Interestingly, with regards to Arrival, so the situation is that creatures that are not manifestly malevolent, but there is like a question about them, they just, I mean, arrive to Earth, and definitely they have like much more, you know, they are much more developed than humans because they can do the trip. Like, you know, just, I mean, by the fact that they can, you know, humans cannot do the trip to another civilization. They have FTL and they have, like, you know, huge ships. So, I will not discuss Arrival as part of this series. Even though it should be said that, I mean, since I first conceived this, this is like, you know, the First Contact series was already put, like, you know, in shorter form than what is now been uttered, like, as text, maybe 4 years ago, like in what I call my blog, like, you know, posted material from 4.5 years ago. And interestingly, at the time, so, and in the text form, I also discussed, you know, the same, it's pretty much what I just, you know, it's equivalent to the oral lectures, I mean, from this series, like, you know, the video series. But it should be said that since then, I mean, since I conceived it and, you know, put it to text, like 4 years ago, so actually since then the situation, I mean, my own situation, my personal situation, and again, I try to kind of, you know, speak, this series is kind of like an academic discussion that is not supposedly not directly related to my own situation. Like, I deal with stuff, you know, literally, you know, TV criticism, film criticism, like, from like an objective point of view, without relation to specifically my own situation. But it should be said that since then, since 4 years ago, just a second. So one of the kind of like, you know, the major development in my own situation is that actually it became a little bit of an Arrival situation. Yeah, I know what you're thinking about. No, I also, but I mean, unfortunately, this is a huge part of, you know, the expectation of it, because reality is always so much. I mean, reality is so much more. I mean, you know, it's always so much more kind of like, you know, similar to action and porn movies than like to, like, you know, highbrow science fiction, like, you know. People don't know that, but actually, I mean, like, every random action or porn film is more true to life than, you know, on average, than like every kind of like, you know, any kind of like, you know, high-minded, like, philosophical and intellectual science fiction, you know, work of, you know, literature or cinema. I mean, these are all generally so much, you know, detached from reality. Now, if you watch like porn and action films, it's actually more like that. At least this is my experience. This is my experience. So, but yeah, so there is this kind of Arrival. But I mean, that's not what I refer to. What I refer to is that if you remember from the movie Arrival, and like also, you know, of course, it's like a short novel, if I'm not mistaken, yes, a short novel. Like, a lot of it is centered around language, actually. This was not, no, I mean, it wasn't part of my agenda 4 years ago, but it became like that. A lot of what you do surrounds language, like the language of the neurons, the symbol language of the neurons. This is like an interesting phenomenon. But I leave it as outside of the current discussion, because it was not in the original, you know, text, and it's like maybe it's kind of like an addition. I think about maybe I want to kind of like, you know, it's an interesting kind of like, you know, development, like the issue of language and deciphering of language. We will speak about deciphering, the issue of, like, you know, decryption as part of the, you know, analysis of his master voice in like later, but it's not the same situation because this is one-sided communication. The issue of the master voice. So, like in Arrival, also, I mean, so let's get back to childhood then. They don't have problem with language because these aliens, I mean, are like, I mean, they're super smart, and like they speak every language of humans. They don't have problem with it at all. They have, so the situation is pretty, I would say, basic in science fiction, which means, what does it mean basic? That ships from outer space just arrive in Earth. I don't think that they actually land, but I mean, they are hovering, like in Arrival, like they are like very close to, you know, to the ground, and they have aliens, but the aliens don't show themselves immediately. And they seem not to be malevolent. Like, they seem that, I mean, that they are pretty cool guys. Like, I mean, even more than in Arrival, actually. They seem like okay fellows, but, I mean, they don't show themselves. Like, people don't know how they look, and presumably it's very important. Like, there's a question like, why? Why is it so important how they look? It's an interesting question. Why is it of such importance? Like, what do you care about? Why do you care how they look? Is that really important? And also the agenda is not well understood by humans until very late. Now, this is like a very, I would say, bad example. Not bad as like, as literary bad. Bad like, as a negative example of first contact. Like, it's done in the most terrific way, like the worst ways. And there's like a question like, why do they do it that way? Like, everything that is like negative in this situation is manifested in this kind of like, situation like childhood end. First, they don't want to show themselves. They think that, I mean, like this should be like, postponed for later. They don't even show like how they look. And they do it only after 15 years or something like that. Now, only 15 years after the arrival, they just, they expose themselves to humans. With one exception, like, because they posit that, there should be like one person that like is the communicator with them. They don't want to speak with everybody. They're like elitists. But then later they change their, they're relaxing the conditions. Like, they start from a very kind of like, detached point of view. That like, they don't show themselves and they speak only with one person, and these person know how they look. But only he knows how they look. Like, the others don't know, but later they become like more sociable and get out of the ships, and actually they don't have a problem actually to walk the earth. They actually have no problem with that. Like, just, even rent, or buy houses and, just do all sorts of like stuff, like, be socialized. The only problem is that they look like Satan, like the devil. Like, they look just like the devil. Like, in the worst kind of depiction, like European depiction of the devil, that's how they look. That's why they don't like, they prefer not to expose this fact immediately. Because it's because they know that it's going to be like a little bit terrifying to humans. Like, they look just like the Satan, like red, giant horns, like, tail, like, just like that. That's how they look. Which is pretty bad, like, for humans. But nevertheless, they're nice guys. What can you do? That's the prince God gave them. It's not their fault. Like, they're not bad or something. That's how they look. Other than that, they're like, they're pretty cool guys. Now, that's a terrible situation. Not because how they look. This is like anecdotal. But this is actually a terrible situation. It's like a basic situation in science fiction, but it's a terrible situation. And it's not even like understood why they did it that time and not any other time. This is not discussed in the novel. Even though, or maybe it's mentioned, but it's not like a huge issue. Otherwise I would have remembered it. Like, it's not a huge issue, like the question of timing, but it should be asked like, why now? Why not before that? Because again, it should be mentioned that the properties of the universe does not only dictate that this will such a contact, like a meeting, first contact meeting will be between two non-symmetrical entities, because one will be much more advanced than the other one. It also dictates that the superior have like a lot of time to do it. Like, they can do it like they have like a huge amount of time to do it. To dictate what kind of first contact would we like to do. You can say maybe they themselves just now discovered the faster than light rebel. Maybe. But even if it were true, that they just discovered the faster than light rebel now, it still doesn't mean that the time of the first contact is like random, or that that there are no other factors that are involved, because they are not the first to discover FTL. I mean, someone is the first, but only one. Almost everybody that discovered the FTL engine are not the first to do it. So there are other species that are involved, that are even more superior. By the way, this is the case in childhood end. There are actually other species that are more developed than them. It has been discovered along the way that they are not like the rulers of the galaxy or the universe, that there are actually other species that are even superior, and they set the agenda. This is what it's discovered later in the novel. And this actually makes sense, because the behavior is not that of people that their behavior, even though it's kind of it starts from a very kind of elitist point of view, or a superior point of view, I would say, it suggests that they are actually not the masters of the situation, I would say, which is true. Because somebody statistically discovered FTL before them, and they had their own agenda with regards to them. So by proxy or by delegation, they must have had kind of agenda with regards to humans and to other inferior species, which is exactly the situation in the novel. And this all makes sense. Even if these guys are not they have their own limitations, as to where to do to conduct first contact. It cannot be just by accident of when they discovered FTL, because then you could ask, okay, but who discovered it before them and what is their agenda? It's like delegation of the question to the higher species. Now, why such behavior, as you see in childhood ends, actually hints just from the start. From my point of view, that these are actually not, that they are like servants of other masters that are more developed than them. Why? Because they seem benevolent, these creatures in childhood. They seem they seem that they don't want to do too much bad things, but there's a question of what's their agenda? What do they try to do? What's great about this kind of example of what you see in childhood end is that presumably they don't force anything on humans besides but there is exception to that, and the exception is important. Because the fact that there is even one exception means much. Because it shows humans that they're not the rulers anymore, if they had any doubt about it. If I'm not mistaken, they are cool with everything. They don't force anything on humans. They just say, we don't like two things, and you should stop right now. First, if I think it's something related to the apartheid, in South Africa, whatever, something related to South Africa. I don't really remember. They don't like something. It's pretty random. The random behavior by itself, it shows the problem. The fact that they seem not to have an agenda, which seems which suggests that they are not the masters of the situation, which is exactly what has been discovered later in the novel. And also it shows a lot of the problem of the situation, the problem of doing such a major thing without a clear agenda, because they are kind of servants. So presumably they don't like something in South Africa, and also they don't like Milchemet Shvarim, how do you say, a bullfight in Spain or in Portugal. So they say, okay, you should stop whatever you do in South Africa, and you should stop the bullfight in all over the world, especially in Spain and Portugal, because we don't like this shit. So humans are okay, fine. Overall, all in all, humans are already by the 1970s. They got used to think about H.G. Wells' War of the World, the laser machines, and the Thunderchild being crushed, Victorian fleet, crushed to pieces, everybody's dying. So they say, compared to that, so it's not that bad. Okay, we are not that hell bent on the bullfight. So okay, we'll just, we'll play soccer instead. Football is fine as well, and with regard to South Africa, so whatever, we'll stop this, whatever they do. So, initially, humans are, they're pretty cool with this situation. They seem okay. They don't ask a lot. For whatever. We don't need this bullfight, we stop the South Africa, whatever. And other than that, they don't ask anything at all. But what happens in reality is actually something very realistic, but I would say that in reality, such a situation would have been deteriorated to something that is even worse than what's depicted in the novel. Like on the same lines, but even worse situation. An even worse situation, I would say. Like, to me, according to my estimation, a situation like that is described in Childhood Ends would have affected humanity in ways that are very similar to what you actually, read in Childhood or see in the TV show, like in Childhood Ends, but to an even worse, in a worse way, like in a higher magnitude of the problem being observed. So what's the problem? So the problem, even though initially nothing, they also give some technology to humans, like nice stuff, but they seem not to have a clear agenda with that about that as well, which is also a troubling proposition. They don't seem to have a clear agenda to what they give humans, what kind of technology they give them, because they have super tech, of course, as demonstrated by the ships that they have. The ships are enough to demonstrate to humans that technologically they are nothing compared to them. So they should not misbehave. Humans understand it. But they also have other technologies. But they seem not to have a clear agenda as to what do they give humans. They don't give everything straight away. Okay, take our Wikipedia, whatever, take everything. No. They kind of they give some technology to humans and more along the way. But there's not an agenda seems to be missing from the situation, which is a huge problem. And again, it's kind of a hint to that they are not the masters of the situation, which is what you actually discover along the lines, that there are others that are more, that they are the true masters of the situation, they just serve them. They are just, they just work for other species that are more, advanced, but they are not the true rulers. So, but yes. So humans, presumably they are in a good position. The situation is presumably benevolent because they only need to give up a bullfight, which is, most people don't really care about it too much. So some people in Spain might be, disappointed, but whatever. And something in South Africa, I don't remember. And that's it. And in return, they get all sorts of nice tech technology. Even though not everything they can dream of, but a lot of they gradually get new stuff. But what happens, as described in the novel, is actually something very realistic. In reality, what would have happened would have been what you see in what's described in the novel, but much worse extent. A much worse version of what is depicted would have been happened. And what happens is that humans become they lost the will to live, not the will to live, but the will to advance. They become lazy, and science just halts. Nobody is doing science anymore because it seems ridiculous to them. Why should you bother? Because obviously these guys have so much better science. So let's just בוא פשוט נחכה שיתנו לנו את זה, ואם לא יתנו אז נתבכיין ונשאל למה אתם לא נותנים לנו, תנו לנו יפה, תנו לנו, בסוף הם תנו לנו, אז אפשר לחכות שתנו לנו. מה עכשיו, לחקור ולהשקיע מאמצים בסופר קוליידרס ולא יודע מה, מיקרופרוססורס ולא יודע, וג'יימס ווב סופר טלסקופ וכל אחד זה, מלא כסף וללמוד ועוד טוב, ואינפי 1, אינפי 2, אינפי 3, אינפי 4, אינפי 5, אינפי 6, מטף, וכמה מטף אפשר? אז במקום זה פשוט נבעים בכיין, טוב, תביאו כבר לא יודע מה, תביאו את ההולודק הזה כבר, שנוכל להפסיק להיות בג'יי-דייט בשביל סקס, זה נמאס לנו כבר מכל הסיפור הזה של ג'יי-דייט. אז אנחנו רוצים סקס, לפני אתה הולדה כבר, וכאילו לפתור את רוב הבעיות. בסוף הם יביאו את ההולודק, המפלצתונים האלה, הסטנים האלה. אז כאילו, פשוט עדיף להתבחן, תביאו את ההולודק, תביאו, מה עשינו כבר מקורה לסיפור הזה של דייטים, ותראו, זה מעצבן, אף אחד לא אוהב את זה, ואנשים נמאסים גברים, גברים נמאסים נשים, אנחנו רוצים קצת להזדהן וזהו, תביאו את ההולודק, נו. כאילו, מה? למה, מה אתם חושבים שעושים בהולודק? כאילו, כמו בסטארטרק, כל הזמן, פרופסור מוריארטי, לא פרופסור מוריארטי, לא, ג'נה ג'יימסון, לא פרופסור מוריארטי, מספיק עם השטויות. מה, אתם ילדים קטנים? ג'נה ג'יימסון, לא פרופסור מוריארטי. So anyway, that's what happens, in the novel. Like, humans just don't do science or serious tech anymore at all. They just become lazy, and the governments lose the authority of the people. And they somewhat, even like the deterioration to chaos, but this is stopped by the aliens. And it's kind of like a sad proposition to humans. And this is expected by the aliens. The devils, these Satans, they know that's going to happen. So why do they do? So why do they even do it? Like, what's their agenda? So it's been discovered, like, ultimately it's been discovered that there is an agenda for them. And the agenda is, maybe positive, maybe negative. It's difficult to estimate because the agenda, and this is not actually like a new thing in science fiction. Like, it's another trope in science fiction. It's the agenda of transhumanity, like that of preparing humanity towards like another step in which there will be no more humans. Basically, the end of humanity. But they will not die like in a brutal way. They will transcend to like another dimension, which is a higher dimension. They will not live any longer, not in Earth anyway, not in they will not enjoy living like in a material way. And basically, they will join like other aliens that have done so, including the masters of these Satans. Now, Satans, they themselves, they did not do it. For some reason, I don't remember if it's like mentioned why. They are kind of like volunteers to stay in our corporeal, realm, in flesh and blood, with great tech and, nice mannerism, but they don't enjoy this kind of like transcendence to higher beings, but they serve higher beings. And what they do is that they convince pretty, roughly and blatantly, convince, without much, any kind of like option to like I can offer, they cannot refuse. They cannot really refuse the proposition, like that for sentient races that to stop existing, like in a material way and transcend to higher beings in higher dimension. While they themselves, the Satans, they stay here in this universe, like as to do that job. And this is the end of humanity. Like, humanity is dead, like, now. Even though, maybe it's like a better, you can't really judge, like, if this is good or bad, because it's like, by definition, out of this world, like, out of this existence, like, they transform to other things. Now, all of that is very, very grim, but it's also very realistic. And it's a huge reason of why the Star Trek Prime Directive exists in the first place, because all of that is very realistic. Maybe metaphorically so, but maybe the last stage is just a metaphor, but everything else is very realistic. Because in any given, meeting between two sides that are so different from each other technologically, the stronger side will just have no option other than destroy the weaker side if they choose to expose themselves, like in ships, like it's described in Childhood Ends and in many other, or in Arrival and many other, it's a common trope in science fiction. Because once the inferior species, they actually see with their own eyes the material, aspect of existence, of existing, of creatures that are of such a higher, technology, they they will inevitably become dependent on these creatures for everything. They'll just ask them for, give us that, give us that, give us that. I mean, why should they bother even, like, choose their own, like, their own path when the path is already chosen by others? And it's not just technology and science. It's also related. This is also a problem with regard to culture, because the cultural output would probably stop. Like, I mean, there will be no kind of like incentive for humans to keep advancing, advance their culture according to their own standards, because they will adapt inevitably the standard of the higher beings, because they will set the tone for everything. It's not that they set the tone for like even like two things, like like I've said, like presumably random, like a bullfight and whatever happened in South Africa. It's enough. I mean, for humans to just let go of any kind of like notion of independence, because once they force them to do even just two things, humans know that there are these creatures, like they are right here in front of us, and they will force us. They choose the best for us, and we cannot deviate much. Even if they don't force us, to many concrete things. The mere possibility is devastating from the human perspective. And in reality, what will happen is that it's even worse than that. Than what I've just described. Like, what will happen is that all authorities will just break. Like, it's not just even culture and science that will halt, and technology, but also governments will lose control over the people, because people will have no respect for the governments once they see in front of their eyes creatures that have complete control over their own governments, and so the governments, they kind of like reduced to just mere, like accomplices and mitigators between the people and the higher beings. Now, all of that happened many times in Earth. It's not a theory. These things already happened, not with aliens per se, but with the situation of first contact between civilization. And I said that this is not in the scope of this, I would say, this series, but it's discussed a lot in the context of post-colonialism, because it's part of history of Earth. Like, that two cultures, mostly it was between Europeans and others, like in Africa, South America, Australia, everywhere. Mostly it was between Europeans and others, where the Europeans were like the aliens, like the higher beings, technologically speaking, and many times they actually wrecked the local culture. And because they were not, but even if mostly they were malevolent, but even if in cases they tried, even in the rare cases where they tried to be benevolent, even then they almost always crushed the local culture, because there are so many problems that arise from this situation. The problem with generation. Young people they don't give they stop giving respect to the parents and to traditional establishment, because the traditional establishment seems to be ridiculous now that we have all these kind of new white people with their McDonald's and and gunpowder and later PlayStation. So they break authority and they don't get something to replace it. Sometimes they do. Like what happened with Christianity. Like I'm not saying that everything was great, but it should be said that Christianity many times was a way to replace things that just lost, not due to, not necessarily because of the Christian authorities. Like many times missionaries and priests, like in the tradition of colonialism, they just mitigated a situation that was not like the result of their agenda or it was not their work, like the work of the conquistadors. Like they did not start this fight and they did not start the subjugation. It was already a situation going on, and under these conditions, many times the priests of the time, the missionaries, they were incredibly important, like in mitigating very, very grim very grim cultural situation. Many times they even done whatever they can to preserve like local culture. Like in the case of the Maya, that was completely wrecked by the Spanish. But sometimes the priests of the church people, they did whatever they can just to preserve whatever books. They were not the people that destroyed. Yes, I mean they belong to the same culture. I mean, but it wasn't them. Like, what can they do? I mean, they acted within their limitation. And yes, the Spanish did completely acted the Maya. Like, I mean, they did, and huge treasure was lost forever. But sometimes, I mean, what was preserved because of people of like missionary attitudes. So it should be said that it's a complicated situation, but it's like inevitable. Because even if you are benevolent, the clash of civilization, I mean, will inevitably be resulted in the I would say, technology inferior civilization becoming dependent on the higher one and then just destroyed. You could say metaphorically that it will transcend itself to something higher, or maybe it will transcend themselves. They will transcend themselves to morbidly obese McDonald's, chuggers. I mean, which it might be good. I don't know. I mean, Titan females like this kind of type of I think this is like super sexy, or this kind of like mountain, salmon people that like eat like 10 burgers a day. Like Titan females are totally, this is like this is pretty much the sex symbols of Titan females. So I'm not saying it's like totally bad, but I mean, it's just, I mean, they lost they lose their identity very quickly that way. Now it's inevitable because of it doesn't matter that, I mean, if you are benevolent, by declaration, but the situation is malevolent by nature. But because when you expose that power, like when you manifest the power, like when you expose the ships, the actual ships, and you put them like on Earth, like in Arrival or in many other movies, like when the ships actually arrive to Earth, people can watch it with their own eyes. I mean, then it's enough, like, to lose all respect and all, like, obligation towards local authorities. Like, why would you respect the local sheriff or the local policeman when you have, like, a huge starship like just hovering, next to you? I mean, why should you care about the sheriff? I mean, why would you respect the guy? Okay, so maybe I'll stop this video and start another video soon, and we'll do it like a 5-part. I thought maybe, covering the next topic as well. So I just mean now do some kind of introduction to the second topic, to the next topic. So I mean, you can say, okay, we don't want to do like recreate a childhood's end or Arrival because of the grim outcome. Whatever, I mean, benevolent or malevolent, I mean, the intentions, I mean, it's demonstrated that the method itself is malevolent. But I mean, you cannot presumably do it in a good way. But wait a second. Why not? So instead, but in the other hand, we do want to presumably conduct first contact, because otherwise, I mean, they will reach as lesson from the previous 2 parts. Because sometimes maybe they will, the inferior culture will discover FTL engine, and then, I mean, presumably they just roam the galaxy and like the private jungle and start wars and do irresponsible stuff. So the point of discovery of the FTL engine is like a maximum, or the latest that, I mean, of all possibilities to conduct first contact in a way that will not disrupt, the galactic order. But we asked, I mean, so why not before that? Because of the association of the FTL engine with wars and everything that was discussed in the previous videos. So, but you say, so on the other hand, we want to have like a procedure towards first contact, but it should not be done like this way, like, in childhood's end. Because it's so, like, I mean, threatening to just send ships. that, I mean, manifested power. So wait a second, maybe we, as like the superior aliens, right, maybe instead of like send ships that are so frightening, maybe we could just send mail, right? I mean, so why send a ship or a fleet of ships? Maybe you can just send them a mail, like a mail message. A mail is much less frightening, like, you know, why? I mean, you know, just a mail, I mean, what can be so frightening with mail, you know? It's not like you don't see ships, you don't see, you know, any kind of, like, you know, manifested power or symbols of powers. You just receive a mail message. Send an email. They said this could have been an email. So this could have been, presumably this could have been an email. Like, why don't you just send an email to the guys and I mean, this would have been much less frightening. So this is this will be the topic of the next installment in the series, in which we will discuss the novel His Master's Voice by the Polish author Stanislaw Lem.